your father and I planned, well, I want to go on it, will you go? Well, from that moment, well, earlier than that, if our parents asked us to go somewhere, we'd stop everything, because their attitude was, if you can't travel better than you live day to day, then why do you travel? Well, if your parents have that attitude, you say yes ma'am and yes sir to everything. So we went on that fateful trip. Well, for any of you that know my older sister, she is something else, a little bit more twinkle in her eye, a little more daredevilish than I am. So she'd go up to business class to go to the ladies' room, and she started talking to this Italian gentleman, who then ended up coming down to the regular class. We were the first row of the regular class, because he was taken by a mother and two daughters. And he ended up giving us his name and restaurants in Rome, and said, when you come to Florence, give me a call. And my mother said, thank you very much. Well, we tried the restaurants. They were fabulous, but we were not about to call this Italian gentleman. Well, down from Rome, we went to the Amalfi Coast. And for any of you that have been there, you can understand what I'm describing. But we stayed at a place called Il San Pietro Hotel. If you've not stayed there, spend about 6 months of what you're living on right now and go. You'll never forget it. But you get to the top of the hill, the cliff, and you walk around a small chapel and down these beautiful stone path, and you get in an elevator and you go through the rocks for about 5 stories. And it opens up into an arched and chiseled ceilinged big room with dark tiles and fabulous art from the Amalfi Coast by different artists. And after you check in and turn left, there is the dining room with peach-colored tablecloths and bougainvillea that's flowering from the ceiling, and you're looking out to the Mediterranean Ocean and smelling that pizza. And on the table were all these dinner plates with mixed animals and flowers. And I think I fell in love for the first time, and that was with the plates. So we ended up spending 3 of my mother's vacation days going back and forth, going, oh my God, we've got to buy this for ourselves, for our friends, for our family members, to having drinks with a couple from New York. Now that's very Eastern North Carolina. You got to have a drink with these new people who said, you should not be retailing, you should design and wholesale. And we went, perfect, that's great, that's what we'll do. Well, I had a master's in child development and started the outpatient play program at Duke. And Frances had a master's in industrial design, so an asset and a liability were not part of our vocabulary at that time. But we knew that tobacco could move all over the world, so why couldn't plates move? So with that and a notebook, we started studying every possible thing we could study. Before that, from the Amalfi Coast, we went up to Florence. And in, again, my mother's style, she was going to buy us a little piece of jewelry to remember the trip. So she had her pocketbook and her, we put our passports in there. And those were the days of cash and traveler's checks, if you remember that. And we looked and didn't see anything and went to this restaurant and drank a bottle of wine and toasted Daddy and our family and how lucky we were. Came up to go to walk back. Mama wanted a taxi. We had a little bit of an argument, the only argument. We started walking and a motorcyclist came by, pushed Mama, grabbed her pocketbook, and we lost everything. So at 9 o'clock that night, we did what you never do in Italy, which is go to the police station. If you lose something, forget the police station. Nothing ever gets done there. We spent about 2 hours from the police being like this. And remember, I was 30 years old. And I was a cute 30-year-old, right? It wasn't bad. suddenly their shirts are unbuttoned and they're trying to speak English, and my mother says, we get home and the next morning she said, remember that nice Italian man? We need help. So we pick up the phone and call Fabio Puccinelli. Well, Fabio does not look like the movie star Fabio, I guarantee you. But he was home, he came, he took us to get passports, he took us to lunch, and he said, but Mama, where do you want to go? And she goes, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So off to the Leaning Tower of Pisa we go. We tell him about the plates coming back, and suddenly we are going up this beautiful stone driveway to a palazzo outside of Florence, and he's getting out going, Vini, come with me, knocking on the door, and it's a friend of his that worked for Macy's Corporation. He wanted us to tell him about these plates. She said, beautiful designs, they're crooks, you'll never get the product, I wouldn't do it. But here's my number, if you end up coming back, please call me. So we went back home as good old Eastern North Carolina strong women of, well, we got to try. I mean, who cares if somebody says, we can talk them into this. So we started with our notebook. We went to Norfolk, found out about freight forwarders. I went to Cereves and Wilson to find out about import-export. We went to banks in Rocky Mountain and Chapel Hill thinking we interviewed banks to decide what bank to go to, and we ended up choosing the only woman who was head of Nations Bank because she was so excited about what we did. So one thing Daddy had done that I tell people because I think it's something special we should all think about now that most of us are the older generation, is that when Daddy died, of course we didn't know anything about wills. We were from 33 to 18. But he had had a handwritten piece of paper. And it said, to my 4 children, Francis, Susan, Stephen, Paige, I'm so proud of each of you. I know you will do well in your life. Here is $2,000 each to go blow on a good time. So we took our $2,000, and my mother lent us 16, and we started Vietri with $20,000. And we thought that was the most money we had ever seen at that point. We signed up with I think it was called Nations Bank at that point, and we borrowed another $25,000. We went back that next September, and we signed our first contract. After we get there, and Don Vincenzo, the only Don of the Amalfi Coast, if you remember The Godfather, says, no, the prices, I said, they are no good anymore. Here are the new prices. So we spend 3 days with one of those calculators, remember those hand things, trying to figure out what the price was that we could get it over and wholesale it. And we figured it out, and we knew when we left that 23,000 pieces of dinnerware were coming in 6 months, and we didn't know where we were going to put it and what we were going to do with it, but we knew somehow we were going to make this work. So the next October, and I'm almost finished with the beginning of the story, found out about the New York tabletop show. That was where wholesalers or retail stores went to buy goods. Talked this gentleman, Mr. White, into giving us the space by the column of the registration desk, 6 feet by 6 feet. Had all our friends who were fancy people working on Wall Street come with the table and chairs and everything because we couldn't afford to rent anything. Asked the waiter of the restaurant, who had on a bit of a dirty, but he did speak Italian accent, to pour wine when we had a guest. And lo and behold, our first customer were these great-looking, well-dressed foursome who in those days would sit and tell you what they were going to order, and that was Neiman Marcus. They ended up writing a $12,000 order. That was $12 million again, as far as we were concerned. And once the first container came, and the British Moorheads that we knew, and Mama and her friends from Rocky Mount, they were about 55 at that point, and then we went to the bus station and got all the people at the bus station that needed a job. And we undid that first container, and by the next morning, we boxed up Neiman's order and shipped it. And they have been an account of ours for 40 years.